And ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecution is not going to get that man today. No, because I'm going to get him.
This is the Hagmann and Hagmann Report for today. It is a terrific Tuesday. It is June 18th, 2013. I'm Doug Hagmann. With me in studio is my co-host, my son, fellow investigator Joe Hagmann. Together we are the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Folks, you're about to hear 3 hours of unbiased and uncensored news analysis and information that you need to know in these perilous times. Folks, have we got a show for you just really quick? I got to hurry up and put this in here. We're going to be joined in hour number 2 by somebody. I'm not even going to tell you who it is right now because it's that good. You won't know him by name, but you will get an education as to what is taking place today. Okay, I guarantee you, you won't know him by name. He's not going by his name, and rightfully so, because he is a target and has been a target. But you're going to find. I'm so excited. Joe and I are so excited to have this gentleman on. He is somebody that knows what's going on, has 150 years, I think, of experience in various intelligence agencies. Just kidding about the 150 years, but probably the equivalent thereof. But more about him at the top of the second hour. He'll be joining us at the top of the second hour. We'll have him for an hour at least, if we can twist his arm, maybe a third hour, because we've got some important stuff to talk about. But for the new listeners, folks, you're listening to the only show where the news is presented to you in 3D. We look beyond the bylines, headlines, the white noise of the news, bring you the news behind the news. We broadcast live each and every weeknight from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern, and you can find us on the internet at HomelandSecurityUS.com. Friends, if you have any trouble whatsoever, we're simulcast by the Christians United Broadcasting Network, and I want to thank Troy for that. You can find us clean stream at the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.com, the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.com. There you'll find a clean audio stream. And I'll tell you what, tonight you'll want that for sure. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your belief and your trust in us as we walk through this minefield of current events together. We really appreciate your trust and just your being an extended family. Thank you so much for being there. Joe, let's hit the news hard, because this second hour is just going to be tremendous. But and third hour too, I'm sure of it. But what's the news? I mean, obviously we've got just so much news to cover. It's hard to even catch up, and it seems like it gets harder and harder every day. Where do you want to start?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, when I got loaded up on the audio clips, we have NSA members saying that 50 terror plots have been prevented since 9/11. We have news out of the G8 summit, what they're talking about, which is arming the Syrian rebels. We also have uncovered Obama phones sold by drugs and sold for drugs.
Of course, we see that here in our hometown all the time. Actually, I had the occasion to be at my stepson's office one day, and I saw the line wrapped around the block of his office. Now he's in an office building where they give the phones out. He doesn't give the phones out, and you can watch the people pick up these phones and drive down the road. And 6-8 blocks away, sell the phones, for drugs.
Well, they sell the phones at the some of these convenience stores that recycle and buy them and recycle them for the money. Yes. We're going to start out with some Big Brother news today. Big Brother alert cameras in the cable box to monitor TV viewers. It hardly gets more Orwellian than this. New technology would allow cable companies to peer directly into television watchers' homes and monitor viewing habits and reactions to the product advertisements. The technology would come via the cable box, and at least one lawmaker on Capitol Hill is standing in opposition. Now, this is an article from the Washington Times, but I must say, this has been going on. You have a cable box, take it apart. You'll find a camera in there.
I'm going to tell you something. Okay, the black electrical tape is going to go all across the front of my box, the cable box. Folks, there's just something terribly, terribly, terribly wrong with this scenario, isn't there? Really?
No, not at all. Well, we have a new app on smartphones that pays you to spot illegally parked cars. Becoming a bounty hunter may soon get a lot easier. Spot Squad, a mobile phone application in the works that allows users to report illegally parked cars and get a cut of the fine paid as a reward. How nice. Created by technology startup in Winnipeg, Canada, the app aims at crowdsourced parking enforcement at privately run lots and potentially on public streets. The reporting process is as simple as taking a photo of the car, which is GPS tagged, while optical character recognition reads the records and license plate number. Then choosing from a list the type of infraction observed, everything from expired meters to unauthorized parking in a handicap spot. Based on the location of the vehicle, the report is automatically sent to the operator of the lot or the local law enforcement agency if it is on public property. Then personnel is dispatched to issue a notice and have a ticket to get it towed. And all this, you spying on your neighbor's parking, can get you some money. You can get a cut of the fines that they are giving out. Wow, I can just see people running across the cities. Oh my goodness. Let's go to this cut of the this soundbite of. We're going to switch gears. We're going to go to the soundbite of Bill Ayers because things are getting way out of hand. We have Obama's. You're muted, by the way. We have Obama's terrorist.
It's a good thing I'm muted. It's a doggone good thing I was muted there because
Obama's terrorist best friend, Bill Ayers. We've had Larry Graffel on the show many times. He was the head of the Weather Underground. Bill Ayers was. They bombed the Parks Police Station, killed the sergeant there. Jim Perry was a police officer when that happened in San Francisco.
Brian McDonald, by the way, I believe his name is, that was killed.
They bombed the New York police station, the Pentagon, and when they were charged and they were set free, his words were guilty as hell and free as a bird. But now he's turning on Obama, saying Obama should be tried for war crimes. Listen to this.
I love that music, right?
What would be your rating of his presidency at this point, based upon not personality but policy and politics?
You know,
A through F.
I'd give him a failing grade, but then you have to compare that to the grades I gave all the other presidents in my lifetime,
which have all but been F.
Yeah, with some F minuses even. I don't at all feel that that Obama's let anybody down. All through the 2008 campaign, he said consistently, "I am a middle of the road, pragmatic politician."
What did you like about him?
Well, he's a curious person. I mean, one of the things I like about him is he's curious. He wants to know things. He asks questions. He's not just charming. He's also interested. He reads. For example. So all of that I find, good. And I liked him personally. I mean, he's a really good guy.
With all due respect, you hold Johnson with disdain. You hold Bush, Nixon with disdain, but isn't Barack Obama, as the sole authority for drone use, engaged in terrorist activity?
Absolutely. And I.
So what's the response? I mean, how?
What's the response? The response
to him
is
directly.
To oppose it. To stand up in noisy opposition.
Do you think Barack Obama should be put on trial for war crimes?
Absolutely. Every president in this century should be put on trial. Every one of them.
For war crimes.
For war crimes, absolutely.
In The Hague.
Absolutely. Every one of them goes into office, an office dripping with blood, and then adds to it. And yes, I think that these are war crimes. I think they're acts of terror.
Okay, drive me out of my mind. Wow.
Listening to that is enough to drive me out of my mind.
Okay. Oh man, I don't believe a word that man said. I don't believe that he.
No, he's playing to the younger communist generation, the Occupy Wall Street, real far left people. But
I
never thought I'd say this.
Well,
you agree with him to the point that Obama should be tried for war crimes, as should Bush.
Well,
and Cheney. And throwing Biden while we're at it. I mean, and why? The drones are one reason. Here's another.
The Group of 8 summit was alive today with talk of Syria and the U.S. move to intervene there more directly. The international gathering convened in Northern Ireland. As the G8 leaders arrived today, Syria's bloody civil war overshadowed the conference's usual focus on trade deals and unemployment. The U.S. decision to send arms to the Syrian rebels guaranteed the issue a place in the summit's spotlight. At the same time, it fueled a growing dispute between Washington and Moscow. President Obama and Russian President Putin met privately on the sidelines of the meeting today in Enniskillen, Northern Ireland. Publicly, at least, the tone was conciliatory.
We do have differing perspectives on the problem, but we share an interest in reducing the violence, securing chemical weapons, and that we want to try to resolve the issue through political means if possible.
Of course, our opinions do not coincide, but we are united by the common intention to end the violence, to stop the number of victims from increasing in Syria, and to resolve the problems by peaceful means.
But Putin was much more blunt in London yesterday, without President Obama at his side. Criticizing any move to aid the rebels, he cited a notorious incident involving a rebel commander.
I believe one does not really need to support the people who not only kill their enemies, but open up their bodies, eat their intestines in front of the public gaze and cameras. Are these the people you want to support? Are they the ones you want to supply with weapons?
Putin also defended Russian arms shipments to the Assad regime. Back in Moscow today, the Russian foreign minister accused the U.S. of mounting military exercises in Jordan as a cover for implementing a no-fly zone over Syria, something Russia opposes.
I think we fundamentally will not allow this scenario. And reports that our American partners are doing preparatory works at military complexes related to this in Jordan are also a direct violation of international law.
And in Damascus, Syrian President Assad condemned the U.S. move, telling a German newspaper that Europe will pay the price if it does the same. In Washington on Sunday, former Vice President Dick Cheney took the opposite tack, warning that President Obama is doing too little, too late in Syria.
They had an opportunity earlier to provide support without having to get American forces directly involved, and they took a pass. Now they're going to do it. But the question is whether or not they're a day late and a dollar short.
White House Chief of Staff Dennis McDonough answered critics across the spectrum by saying the president has no intention to rush to war.
We want to make sure that Syrians who want to take charge of their own country have the ability to do that. We have to be very discerning about what's in our interest and what outcome is best for us and the prices that we're willing to pay to get to that place.
The Syrian conflict itself is increasingly devolving into a sectarian war. On Sunday, Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi, a Sunni, cut diplomatic ties with Damascus. He demanded that Shiite Hezbollah fighters from Lebanon leave Syria. And late today, the Obama administration announced it would send an additional $300 million in humanitarian aid to those affected by the Syrian crisis. That brings the total U.S. assistance to nearly $815 million since the civil war began.
Okay. Now, a few things. One, the G8 people talking said that they disagree on policy and the way things are being brought about. But they agree on one thing, and that is peace. But both sides agree to bringing about peace by sending in weapons, missiles, and tools that will be used to increase the death tolls in Syria and surrounding areas. 2, $813 million in humanitarian aid. I didn't know AK-47s, shoulder-fire rocket missiles, ground-to-air surface missiles count as humanitarian aid. Here's a member of the House of Representatives, Mr. Gohmert.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition? That objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, I realize that there are many in schools that are not taught as much history as they should now because they're teaching to this ridiculous test. But it is important we learn from history. And right now in Syria, we have rebels that are backed by Al-Qaeda, and this administration and even some in this building want to rush to the aid of the Al-Qaeda-backed rebels, while there are others that say, well, maybe we'd be better off if Assad stayed in power. It's a lose-lose situation for the United States, and when that's the case, it's time to stay out. Maybe early on, before Al-Qaeda got so powerful, it had been time to do something. But when it is a national security risk, when we get involved in an entangling situation like that, it's time to look back. What caused World War I? Entangling alliances. Does the entangling alliances involving Russia and so many other countries in Syria ring bells? It's time the bells rang and we stayed out.
George Washington, beware of foreign entanglements. We would be wise to remember that. You see, folks, this is all about creating the framework for World War III. This is all about the creation. And I know that the regular listeners are saying, Doug, come on, man, we know this. But for new listeners, and I want to say hello to Chris out of Wales. God bless you, Chris. By the way, thank you for pointing that error. I had an error on coding error on my website. I want to thank you, Chris. But anyway, this is all about creating the infrastructure for a global governance. This is all about World War III. This is all about doing the bidding of the Saudis as a stepping stone for the creation of an Ottoman Empire, the recreation or the reconstruction of the Ottoman Empire. And then from there, we go into the 10 different zones all across the United States, or all across the world, 10 different regions, governed by one single entity. That's what this is all about.
Yes, it is. And now not only is there unrest in Turkey, but we have unrest in Brazil. I don't know how many of you guys saw this today. As Brazil's biggest protest in 20 years is sweeping through the country, as many as 200,000 demonstrators marched through the streets of Brazil's biggest cities on Monday in a swelling wave of protest, tapping into widespread anger at poor public services, police violence, and government corruption. The marches, organized mostly through snowballing social media campaigns, blocked streets, halted traffic in more than a half dozen cities, including Sao Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, and many others, where demonstrators climbed into the roof of Brazil's Congress buildings and stormed it. Monday's demonstrations were the latest in a flurry of protests in the past 2 weeks that have added to growing unease over Brazil's sluggish economy, high inflation, and a spurt in violent crimes. While most protests unfolded as a festival display of dissent, some demonstrators in Rio threw rocks at police, set fire to parked cars, and vandalized state assembly building. Vandals are also destroying property in the southern city of Porto Alegre. Around the country, protesters waved Brazilian flags, dancing and chanting slogans such as "The people have awakened," "Pardon the inconvenience, Brazil is changing." Big events loom. Protesters have gathered at pace at Brazil is hosting the Confederation Cup, a dry run for next year's World Cup Soccer Championship. The government hopes these events, along with the 2016 Summer Olympics, will showcase Brazil as an emerging power on the global stage. They're also gearing up to welcome 2 million visitors in July as Pope Francis makes his first trip back for a gathering of Catholic youth in Rio. So we have unrest gripping most continents in the world right now.
Well,
what changes, earthquakes in Greece. I don't know if you guys have noticed the 4 to 5 point earthquakes that have been happening in Greece. Yeah, they're happening in the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, the Pacific Ridge. They're happening all over the globe. 4, 5, and even 6 point earthquakes. We have weird storms that have been making their ways across different parts of the world also. The weather changes, the sun changes, the earth changes, everything is changing. Seems to be getting worse. Is there going to be any end in sight? Will things get better before they get worse, or will they get worse until they stop?
Well, you know, I want to add to this too, because Bob and Maggie, thank you, Bob and Maggie, for reminding me about this. Folks, you heard, I'm pretty sure you folks have heard about this, at least those plugged in. And a lot of times, Joe and I will go over news and figure, well, you've heard about it, or, you know, it fits, and sometimes we just gloss over things too quickly. But and again, I want to thank listeners Bob and Maggie for sending this to me. This information, of course, is not exactly new, but how many of you have heard about this on the mainstream media or in the mainstream media? As of January 23rd of this year, it's been reported that the Federal Reserve is missing $9 trillion. Now, Joe, did we cover that? I don't recall us covering that.
Yeah, you mentioned it yesterday.
Okay. I mean, I thought I did, but we gloss over things very quickly sometimes. And I think Marianne had sent that piece of information to us. But really what we need to do is we need to be connecting dots right now. Because, you see, we've got World War III on the horizon. We've got the murder of the dollar on the horizon. And those people who think that that's not going to happen, there's nothing more I can tell you to convince you of that. I think if you go through the broadcast that with Steve Quaylen, the guerrilla economist, I think you'll understand. And if that doesn't help you understand, I know Ann Barnhart, a previous guest on our show. She has a 2.5-hour video series out on YouTube. That's barnhart.biz, but look for her videos on YouTube. That breaks down. It's like it's like the global economy for dummies, and I'm a dummy when it comes to economy. I can barely balance a checkbook. Of course, when you're only dealing with like 3 numbers or 4 numbers or whatever, it's pretty easy to do. But that said, mathematically, we can't make it. So what's going to happen with the Fed missing $9 trillion? And I'm going to get to that. I'm going to get to that $9 trillion here when I find the completed article here. But this is important. But what would you say about Bernanke?
Bernanke says that he's been there at the Fed longer than he would like, and there's talk about him stepping down. And this is something that has been circling the wagon for the last couple months as all these different appointments were being made and people were shifting in and out of positions. There's a woman that is going to be the head of the Fed according to certain circles of news media.
I don't think he's stepping down as much as fleeing. Seriously, I would look at this as a flight.
Yeah, I would fill my briefcase with as many of the, or just take some of the printing machines out move him to his basement, and or couple briefcases full of the money, and get out of there. I mean, this guy has been nothing but like Obama. He just takes orders. He does what he's told. He presses the on button when he's told to press it, and he presses the off button never because he hasn't been told to.
Right.
As far as printing the money is concerned, the furloughs that were happening at the federal government level due to $85 billion, this is what they needed, $85 billion a month in operating money. It's the same amount of money the Federal Reserve is printing a month in their quantitative easing 3 program.
That's just a coincidence, right?
But no. They use their money to buy the mortgage-backed securities instead of giving it to the government to stop the furloughs. And that's where the big fight came in versus Republicans aren't doing enough, and the sequester, all that political garbage we saw.
Well, that's all smoke and mirrors.
Yeah,
and I just want to revisit too this $9 trillion missing from the Federal Reserve. Before it's news, I think it was. And thank you, Marianne, for sending this in yesterday. We did touch on this. Representative Alan Grayson questioned the Fed Inspector General where $9 trillion went, and Inspector General Elizabeth Coleman hasn't a clue. Now, wow. Can you imagine being audited by the IRS and saying, hey, you need to account for that $900 deduction? And you say, hey, I'm sorry, I don't have a clue. Yeah, $9 trillion is what the Fed is lacking. She says to the head of the Inspector General, says that they have no jurisdiction to investigate the Fed, which is a true statement because the Fed is autonomous. And folks, you understand that the Fed is not part of the government. It's an autonomous cabal. It's basically the Chicago mob, the New York mob. It's a combination of all the mob, the Kansas City mob. Where else? The Philadelphia mob. Wherever the little seals on the wherever the Feds are located, the Federal Reserve branches are located. But $9 trillion missing. Where is it? Well, we've got to. Boy, you talk about problems.
Yeah.
If that doesn't just want to make your head explode, I don't know what will. I really don't know.
Well, maybe this. This from Mississippi. Mississippi schools sending children to prison as punishment for misbehavior. Is this punishment or is this training and conditioning? At one point or another during our time in school, as school children, each of us has been in detention or at least knew what detention was. It's usually a classroom where we sit and do homework or be bored while recess is underway, not for students in Meriden, Mississippi. Students here, especially African American and disabled children, face the prospect of prison time for even the silliest infraction. As it turns out, the Department of Justice has been investigating the school system in the city for allegedly having students arrested and placed in juvenile detention. School principals and teachers punish students for infractions such as passing gas, dressing in an unacceptable manner, general disrespect, and swearing. The reasons seem to justify a normal detention, but are laughable reasons to arrest and imprison children. According to ABC, a Department of Justice letter details the constitutional and moral violations committed by the school district, the police department, the youth court, and juvenile detention center of the city of Meridian. But no, this is we see yesterday we covered the story where the school child was told that he will face prison time for not removing or turning inside out his NRA T-shirt. We have children here being taken to jail for anything that seems to be deemed as inappropriate by a teacher or a school official.
Well, the gun or the T-shirt did have a gun on it, but folks, remember the goals, the communist goals that were read into the 1963 congressional record by Representative Herlong. Remember that? People laughed, and even today, folks, progressives will laugh and laugh in your face because, oh, that's just conspiracy nonsense. But one of the goals of the communists, the progressives of the 50s, the communists, the much celebrated communists, by the way, was to get control of the schools, use them as transmission belts for socialism and current communist propaganda. They were to soften the curriculum, and hasn't that what has taken place? Get control of the teachers' associations, and then put the party line in textbooks. Haven't we seen that happen? In the 1950s, in most parts of the country, this whole thing was unthinkable. Children, they walked to school, these small, decentralized, and folks, I know a lot of you remember this. I remember this, and I was not a child. I mean, I was born in the 50s, but I didn't go to school in the 50s. 1850s? Yeah, keep it up, son. With age comes wisdom. Let me just say that. Not that I have wisdom, but I'll tell you this: the school teachers were, they were our neighbors, and the local school board members, they were our neighbors, and everyone was working really with the same goal in mind, and that was to educate our children. Remember the pride that we had back then? How much of this has changed right now? Today, many children, they're carted, they're bused to schools across town. The schools are bigger. They're centralized. Remember that word, centralized. If you do nothing else from this hour tonight, remember the word centralized, because that's exactly that's the key word for everything that's taking place today is centralization. But the National Education Association, the NEA, that if you think about how much has changed, the schools are larger and centralized. The school board control has been replaced by what? The federal government control. The teachers are now mostly faithful to their progressive National Education Association union, not to us, the parents, not to our children. This, by the way, is forcefully exposed, I should add, in the documentary Waiting for Superman. If you can find that on DVD, grab that. The socialist and Marxist propaganda is so prevalent in textbooks today that entire books have been written exposing this. Some textbooks coming out in recent years are so distorted that even this, folks, have you heard about the People for the American Way? You talk about a progressive group. The People for the American Way are just that. The textbooks coming out are so bad that even they said, wow, this is bad. They came out protesting the fact that one set of new American history textbooks were completely off base when they discussed our own nation's founding without ever mentioning any role religion had played in early America. Think about that. Now, I'm not going to get into all of that, but people say, well, with all the things that are going on in the world, why would you talk about somebody's T-shirt in whatever state it was, or West Virginia? Why would you talk about what Joe just mentioned? Why is that important? Well, the importance is to show you the centralization, what's taking place, and really you have to understand that. And by the way, in hours number 2 and 3, hopefully 3, our very, very special guest, folks. If you're just joining us, we've got a special surprise guest. It's a guest that cannot be named. It actually has a legitimate code name, Deep Undercover Guy, and you guys are going to stick around for this. By the way, while I'm off base and off track and off script, I do want to mention that tonight I'll be on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie for, maybe 3.5 minutes. So if you can, if you want to catch my update about the NSA. I was trying to think of what Tom Danhauser wanted to talk about, and it's about the NSA. But tomorrow I'll be on with Rick Wiles.
Okay. Yeah, that's going to be very good, Rick Wiles. Looking forward to that. Speaking of the NSA, we're going to play this. NSA, 50 terror plots have been prevented since 9/11.
In recent years,
by smartphones,
these programs, together with other intelligence, have protected the U.S. and our allies from terrorist threats across the globe, to include helping prevent the potential terrorist events over 50 times since 9/11. I believe we have achieved this security and relative safety in a way that does not compromise the privacy and civil liberties of our citizens. We would like to make 3 fundamental points. First, these programs are critical to the intelligence community's ability to protect our nation and our allies' security. They assist the intelligence community efforts to connect the dots. Second, these programs are limited, focused, and subject to rigorous oversight. They have distinct purposes and oversight mechanisms. We have rigorous training programs for our analysts and their supervisors to understand their responsibilities regarding compliance. Third, the disciplined operation of these programs protects the privacy and civil liberties of the American people.
Okay, that was National Security Agency Director General Keith Alexander. The head of the NSA said Tuesday more than 50 potential terrorist plots across the globe have been thwarted thanks to controversial surveillance programs recently exposed by a former contractor, Edward Snowden. NSA Chief Alexander took center stage Tuesday when he answered questions on Capitol Hill alongside high-ranking members of the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the National Director of Intelligence Office. Late last week, Alexander promised to declassify and release this Monday a list of planned terror attacks prevented by the NSA surveillance programs. At Tuesday's hearing, however, he said the list was still forthcoming and would be presented to members of Congress on Wednesday. So I guess we have to wait for the fabricated list tomorrow. In the meantime, Alexander claimed
Wait a second. Wait a second. I don't mean to stop you. Yeah, I do. What'd you say?
Okay, last week the head of the NSA said that he would bring to his talk today in front of the Congress.
Right.
A list of 50 terror plots that were thwarted by their NSA surveillance spying program.
Right.
Now, at Tuesday's hearing today, the list was not there.
Okay, I did hear you. Okay, obviously I did hear you. I just wanted to reiterate that point. Think about that, ladies and gentlemen, because you're going before. You're not going before Judge Judy, for crying out loud.
No, and he goes on to say, Alexander today, the release of those documents sparked a considerable debate in the week since Snowden went public, but that selective leaking led to only incomplete and inaccurate information being published. Really, inaccurate. Alexander vigorously denied that the NSA spies on Americans and instead insisted that his agency only specifically targeted non-U.S. persons located abroad, that they were also reasonably believed to have ties with known terrorist groups, which we already know, and we've already said, they've already admitted they use it to spy on Americans. They've listened to over 1 billion phone calls a day of Americans.
You know, I remember the day, folks, and this does have a lot to do with this. Because I got to calm Joe down. First of all, he's not in a good mood today, and second of all, I just have to calm him down because now he's like me, like I usually am. But I got to tell you this: I remember the day of the rotary dial phones, and I'm sure a lot of you do as well. Party lines, remember those? I remember those days too. You'd pick up the phone and your neighbor would be on it, and it's just like, come on. Or, you as a teenager would be on it and talk, and your neighbor would get the manager. I remember those days. But remember when the switch went from analog to digital? And remember the degradation of the signal quality. Remember how analog was pretty good signal quality. Now you've got the digitization in the transmissions of the phones. I've always wondered whether or not that was, or why the switch was made. I understand somewhat the mechanics of it, but I'm curious, was this planned? Was the switch from analog to digital, was it planned so they could store the data in bits like they do on a computer instead of tapes? And you remember the old computer tapes? Maybe some of you do, maybe some of you don't. I think one of my first jobs I ever had was, or I shouldn't say one of my first jobs, one of my first, one job I had for probably 2 months was during the summer, just a fill-in thing. We're hanging tapes and taking tapes off of computer drives. It was huge. I mean, we're talking about a building like a warehouse, and they had nothing but computers for a telephone company, and used to take these huge, like reel-to-reel tapes and put them on to these computers. But my question, and the storage was just a nightmare. Now, the storage for all of this is manageable because of the digitization. So was this planned, Joe? Let me ask you, was this planned?
That's a good question.
Because
I do not know.
I mean, analog, you'd have to rent half the state of Utah. Okay.
Yeah.
Now they just have a warehouse.
And I remember when that switch was made, and the people who had TVs but not cable had to all of a sudden get these antennas for their TVs,
or the boxes.
Yeah, that's what I meant, the boxes. And Alexander here, the head of the NSA, goes on to say about the 50 terror plots disrupted by the surveillance programs. 10 of them were foiled events involving homeland-based threats. And they go on to cite Anwar al-Awlaki. What about the Fort Hood shooting? Since
that's workplace violence.
Hassan talked with Awlaki via email and phone calls. Where was their surveillance? I mean, Awlaki had to be on the list, even if they weren't monitoring Fort Hood Hassan because he was in America.
No, I think they were actually listening. The choice was either Awlaki or Jim Rosen from Fox News. They had to make a choice, so they went with Rosen instead of Hassan and al-Awlaki. I'm pretty sure that's what happened.
Okay, well, they go on to say that they thwarted bombing attempts or terrorist attacks at the New York Stock Exchange, and also one other one here that was some type of Al-Qaeda attack. Where is it?
But by the way, New York Stock Exchange, just so you know, folks, what you see on TV and what's in Manhattan is just for television purposes, if you will. It's not really the stock exchange itself where the activity happens in New Jersey. That's just for show, basically. Just so you know that.
Hopefully we'll see a list of these prevented terror attacks. And if we do, it'll be very interesting to see what they say. On another side of the police state spectrum, Mayor Bloomberg and the New York Police Department are being sued for spying on Muslims. A lawsuit filed against the NYPD accuses the city's police of regularly violating the civil rights of Muslims. The suit claims the NYPD unconstitutionally profiled and intimidated them, thereby discouraging them from practicing their religion.
Okay, and Joe, I finally figured this out. Ladies and gentlemen, I finally figured this out. Okay, now what better way to get okay, you've got, how Muslims and Islam, we're inside our government, we have Islamic infiltration, correct? Just shake your head. Okay, good. All right, now, in the police departments, you've got advisors from places like Council on American Islamic Relations and the ISN and various other Islamic entities. Okay, they set and a lot of times they set the protocol for investigations and such. Now, what you just mentioned there is the Muslims are filing discrimination charges against NYPD, correct?
All right. And it's interesting how this all came about. Remember that Mayor Bloomberg and the NYPD came out and announced that they were doing this program, and kind of gave, like, it would be like the NSA just coming out without Snowden saying, you know, we've been, or the IRS will say, coming out without any journalism interference and saying, you know what, we've been targeting conservatives and Tea Party members.
Well, yes.
Pretty much opening the door for civil litigation to themselves.
Exactly. And therein lies the core or the crux of the issue, folks. I believe that this is paving the way for an attack or attacks or the whittling down of all religions. You see, you've got NYPD really stepping on the rights of the Muslims. So we can't have that. We cannot allow that to happen to the Christians, right? And certainly not the Buddhists or the Hindus or whatever, the Sikhs. So what we have to do is we've got to standardize operations, kind of one size fits all for all religions. And in so doing, they will tell you which God to worship. And you might laugh at that and say, well, no, you can't tell me that. Well, that's where we're headed, ladies and gentlemen. And this is why you've got the Muslim outcry. And I'm convinced of that because if you start connecting the dots, if you look at what's going on behind the scenes, how else does this make sense? If you know that and you know what their goal is a state religion that does not include the worshiping of the Christian God, then this is how it's got to play out, or one way. And don't forget, as we talk about plans and such, you know, there are plans, and then there are backup plans, and there are backup plans to the backup plans, and then there are backup plans to the backup plans to the backup plans. And then there are backup plans to all those backup plans. And with that, they've got backup people to the primary people, to the secondary and tertiary people. And then you've got dates, potential dates. And then you've got backup dates and backup dates and so on and so forth. You get the idea. So when you try to talk about things that are taking place, it's so nebulous that it's difficult to even pin down. The objectives remain the same. The goals remain the same. The plans, of course, are different. But there we see it in action, I believe.
Carl Tetrib, the research journalist, said, the traditional Christian family has been a continual obstacle to the globalist vision of solidarity. The United Nations and its mental health gurus have fought hard to eradicate those old certainties that stood in their way. The results can be disastrous. Students trained to scorn God's guidelines and conform to the crowd are soon driven by evolving new nations that undermine all truth and certainty. And I thought that was a pretty interesting quote and fitting for what we were just talking about, the conforming the state religion and how they are manipulating society, recreating the earth and its religious systems, the political systems, economic systems to benefit and to gain, to put everybody in line for their master's goal of a satanic one world order.
And, you know, I don't have a problem with people laughing at me anymore about that. And when I had, as some of you know, listening, I had to call somebody because our hot water tank finally, after 17 years of service, finally decided that it wasn't going to be working anymore. So I was talking to the worker and who was putting in the hot water tank. And by the way, when did they go up in price? Holy cow! Anyway, I was talking to him, and he said, he was saying, you know, things have changed so much. The very things we were talking about the children too, and about the schooling and about the teachings. he's got a son in school, and he was talking about the very things you were mentioning there, about how it seems like they're pushing the curriculum to, what would you call it? What would you call it? Just I don't want to say communist, but a state type of curriculum.
Yeah, universal, one-minded.
Exactly. And that's why, we think we know what we're doing. We send off our children and our grandchildren to school. We think that we know what they're being taught based on our experiences. Folks, it's not like that anymore. Look at the textbooks. Please, I beg you, look at the textbooks that your children are coming home with, or their homework assignments. Read. Get involved, because you will be surprised. One of the things that we have to do if we ever have a chance to recreate this country, is to get rid of the Department of Education. They are a communist, subversive organization, and many of the teachers' unions as well. But the DEA, holy cow, Department of Education. DEA too, while you're at it.
We have a very interesting guest coming up in the next hour. We got a few minutes before the break. I want to play this excellent audio. Uncovered Obama phones sold for drugs, as this is sad and humorous before our guests. But here, this is a 5-minute audio. Let's play this now.
They're known as Obama phones.
Yeah, we need more phones.
A $2.2 billion lifeline program that doles out free phones to anybody who qualifies, all funded by charges that appear on your phone bill. Although the program was started 2 decades ago, both the employees who give out the phones and the people who receive them credit President Obama.
They could be anywhere. I don't know where.
The Obama phones, are always giving them out?
Do they give them out?
Yeah. Here in Philadelphia?
Yeah.
Congress is currently discussing the waste, fraud, and abuse rampant in the program, so we decided to investigate. Would these Obama phone workers tell us to take phones we don't actually need? Would they tell us these phones are sold to buy drugs?
Obama's being really nice. Anybody makes $15,000 or less. It's kind of a question that I do this here, and unfortunately, there are people on drugs. They get this phone and they go get $40.
Once you guys give me the phone, it's my phone?
Yeah.
Gosh, so I can sell it and stuff.
Whatever you want to do with it.
Okay, so get some money for heroin.
Hey, I'm a judge.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Would they tell us to sell the phones and break the law? And would they tell us, after breaking the law, to plead the fifth?
Now, on my application, one more question. When I come back on the application, should I put down that I intend to sell it, or don't, put that, don't?
Probably, do the fifth on it.
Okay.
You know that's illegal.
It is?
Yeah. It's there's our guidelines. It's against the law. If you're interested in wanting to know how much the phone's worth, recommend you go to any pawn shop.
I could get the phone and then sell it.
Yeah, I don't care what it has.
And if we wanted to break the law and use the money from the free phones to buy a Louis Vuitton handbag, what would the worker in this program that you pay for advise us to do?
Basically, I just need, you know how it is. I love bags, and I have so many fucking bills. I am in debt. So I need to sell as many of these phones as possible to pay off my bills and stuff. So I don't know what to do. Okay. I mean, all I'm saying is thank God.
Well, sorry about that, folks. We got that from RT. I guess they don't have this.
Let me double check where I got that from. Because no, this is from the Daily Caller.
Well, okay, they don't have the same FCC guidelines we do. Oh boy. Okay, well you get the picture.
Guess I didn't listen to that closely enough.
For the AM stations, we apologize. Hopefully, you guys were awake and had your hand over the button.
Okay, so here's our bottom line. The program has spent $2.919 billion in 2012 giving away phones. These phone bills are being footed by the Americans who pay for their own phone bills. A portion of the Federal Universal Service charge, which appears on every handline and mobile bill in all 50 states and the District of Columbia, subsidizes the program. Corporate phone companies are the ones profiting from such an industry. Leader TracFone, which has received more than $1.5 billion, including $440 million in 2012 alone, to provide phones to 3.9 million recipients. This Lifeline program, like the drone program, was started and expanded under started under Reagan, but it was really expanded under George Bush and is widely credited to President Obama.
Yeah, I wanted to point that out. This did start under Ronald Reagan, and you know, people talk about the Reagan presidency. Look, we dare not deify anyone, by the way, regardless of who they are. But Reagan, it was quite a different president. Unfortunately, those who surrounded him were just like we got today. But George Bush, he did expand the phone program, and Obama not only expanded it, he put a rocket to it to where it's at today. Okay, so that is the story about the Obama phones. I just want to kind of circle back because we have 3 minutes here. A couple of things very quickly. I just wanted to say, Linda from Beverly Hills, thank you. Thank you for your kind note, and God bless you. You're not on the naughty list. I also want to say thank you to Larry for the article on the missing $9 trillion. Bob and Maggie, going back to them, they followed up with something that, Joe, that we were talking, you and I were talking about this the other day. You recall, and folks, you recall, the day before 9/11. Remember that?
I do remember that very well, and I remember you were alluding to Donald Rumsfeld.
Yeah,
the $2.3 trillion in missing funds.
Well, see, and thanks, Bob and Maggie. On September 10th, 2001, Rumsfeld, he declared war not on foreign terrorists, but the Pentagon bureaucracy. He said money wasted by the military poses a serious threat. In fact, he said it could be a matter of life and death. Now, think about that. Now, that promise, of course, was changed the next day on 9/11 when the world changed, and the rush was to fund the war on terrorism, which I have to remind people, terrorism is a tactic; it's not a target. The war on waste has been forgotten. So think about this: you had this disclosure of the missing, and these are estimates: $2.3 trillion in transactions.
Do you have a link to the story about the missing money?
Yeah, I do. What I'll do,
send it over to me.
Yeah, I'm not connected to any other. I'll send it over to you. You can post this, but it's off of CBS News, by the way. So those anybody thinking that hey, we need verification. It's hard for me to do two things at once, so let me take care of this now.
Yeah, while you're doing that, I also wanted
to
give you a story that we forgot to hit yesterday.
But wait. Okay, let me just finish this. Okay, $8,000 for a man, woman, child in America. This is back in 2001. Now they're talking about missing $9 trillion out of the Fed. So what are we looking at? Bob and Maggie ask. Is there something that we're looking at? Perhaps. Could this be like a replay of 9/11 or something? Well, I mean, the template was set for 9/11. Now we've got this $9 trillion missing. Could this be something that we're looking at, either imminently, perhaps World War III with Syria, or involving Syria? I don't know. But okay, go ahead. Didn't mean to interrupt.
Detroit is defaulting on their debt. They're going bankrupt.
I was planning on vacationing there.
We don't have time to really get into it and explain how this and why this is so important. A city of a country that's supposed to be in control of creating and issuing their own currency can go bankrupt. Is impossible if that country owns its own money supply and the creation of that money.
Well, obviously we don't own our own money supply.
Right.
The Federal Reserve does. Folks, you're listening to the Hagmann Report on this, the 18th day of June 2013. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us, and thank you for following our hearts. Thank you, people listening to Wales, other locations. Hey, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to hour number 2. Hour number 2 already of the Hagmann Report. This is a live broadcast. It is the 18th day of June 2013. My name is Doug Hagmann. With me is my son, my co-host, my partner, Joe Hagmann. Together we are the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Folks, we've been building up for this. We've been talking about this special guest. I am so pleased to introduce to you a gentleman. We are going to call him by his moniker, Yoda. Now, he was awarded that moniker by a counter-terrorist team that he led in Beirut, Lebanon in the early 1980s. Not a vacation spot, folks. Yoda and others were sitting in a Holiday Inn room under a small arms fire. Imagine that, Beirut, 1980s. Yeah. When the elite team opined that Yoda had packed, about 400 years plus in his chronological mid-40s at the time. That's how old he was at the time. Now at his young age of 76. And by the way, I'm convinced Yoda, who we have with us, I'm convinced that he could probably outrun me. He could probably outshoot me. He could probably outdo all of us because he's had 5+ decades of counterterrorism crisis management experience. You ready for this? In over 100 countries. After honorable service in the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Army, and working as plainclothes street cop in the Midwest, Rust Bucket, Metropolis, he was recruited by Lieutenant Colonel John Powers, Shorty Powers. Now, Shorty Powers, folks, are you ringing the bells? That was the original voice of the astronauts, basically. Colonel Powers was forming a counter-terrorist strategies, tactics, and operations team to train U.S. and allied governments who are organizing, I should say, teams as a result of the Munich Olympic massacre of Israeli athletes. This guy is absolutely unbelievable. His bona fides are untouchable by anyone I know. He's made many close friends in the free world's counterterrorism community, and he's got to go by his name Yoda because why? Well, there are a lot of people that don't like him. Why don't they like him? They're bad guys, basically. They don't like him. And perhaps even some of the good guys because he's good at what he does. Following 9/11, the atrocity of evil, Yoda had this epiphany. He realized that good, hardworking, naive citizens of the finest country in the world, and that's the United States, folks, were oblivious to the real and present threats to our lifestyle and our very lives. I got to tell you, it took me a lot longer than the day after 9/11 to realize that. Yoda predicted that the return of patriotism would be very short-lived. Folks, is it? Absolutely. After 9/11 left the lamestream news cycle, the flags came down. Did you notice that? Good citizen returned to Monday Night Football, Dancing with the Stars, yet Yoda assumed a mission of informing us, the good citizens, of the real and present threats from our enemies, domestic and foreign. So, with that, we are so fortunate to have this man. He actually has a website, folks. It's a magnificent website. It's my understanding that his beautiful wife, Jan, superintends the website. It is magnifiedview.com. That's magnifiedview.com. And I got to tell you, it's a great website. Bookmark it. Go to it every day. It's fantastic. I had not heard about this, and I looked at it, and I thought, man, this is somebody I want to talk to. Joe and I have to talk to. And folks, he has agreed, and we're so humbled that he's agreed to spend some time with us tonight, telling us about where we're at following 9/11 and more importantly, where we're headed. And I think that of all the guests that we've had on about 9/11 and about the militarization of the United States and so on and so forth, I believe this man is the man to listen to. And I guarantee you, you're in for a real treat with that. Yoda, are you there?
I certainly am. Hagmann, thank you indeed for the opportunity. I am my personal pleasure and privilege to be here with you folks. And I want to thank you for having me. Secondarily, I admire you guys because you tell it like it is. You're doing a grand service, and you don't conspiritualize. I don't know if that's a word in English, but you don't sensationalize and you don't promote conspiracies, which a lot of our affinity brothers do in trying to promote the word. They exaggerate it, which, in my opinion, puts a lot of intelligent people off. So thanks indeed for the opportunity. I appreciate your wonderful audience being here. And thanks again for the grand show that you perform.
Well, thank you. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you, Yoda. I know you talked to my father before the show, and really looking forward to this interview. You have a very, very unique and seems to be exciting background. 5 years or 5 decades in counterintelligence in over 100 countries.
Yeah. Were you vacationing, by the way, at that Holiday Inn room in Beirut in the early 80s? Was that your vacation destination of choice, or, you know?
No.
I can't imagine.
I have been in more terrible off-country fever ports than anybody I know. There's a gang that moves around where the action is, mostly journalists, counter-terrorists, and spooks, so everybody gets to know each other. In Beirut, it was really the Concorde. That's where Terry Anderson and the others were kidnapped from. Terry Anderson of AP. But then the act moved over to the Holiday Inn, which pretended it was American then. It transitioned the Pearl of the Orient that Beirut used to be known as to the absolute hellhole that it is today, of course.
Wow. Well, man, I'll tell you, I could spend days with you talking. Let's start this interview, if I can, or if we can. Let's throw out one question here. This is June 2013. You obviously remember that fateful day in September of 2001. On that day, given your experience, given your background, given your knowledge, and I defer to you because of your, I always tell my son, you know, with age comes wisdom. Now, you have much more wisdom and experience than I have, but did you ever expect for us to be here where we are today, 12 years since 9/11?
As you know, I'm older than a rock. I worked with Julius Caesar when he was a corporal. He was a road guard. Back to 9/11, I was probably less surprised than most because the real counter-terrorist experts that are a lot smarter than I am had predicted this for years. We had worked against counterterrorism since 1974, as you commented, since the Munich Olympic massacre, and the real mystery is why it hadn't happened here much earlier, particularly by jihadists. So I had worked in counterterrorism before it was fashionable as it is today. So it wasn't really a surprise. Certainly how they implemented aircraft as bombs were indeed a surprise. I had worked hijackings when it was fashionable. Everybody grabbed an airplane and said, "Take me to Havana." But no one anticipated the elements and components of 9/11. So to that degree, I was, and everybody I know was surprised. I'm not surprised that, as you mentioned, how fast we lost the patriotism. The day after 9/11, I was in a California marked police car. And usually, you guys have the law enforcement affinity experience. Usually when people wave at you in a marked car, you call that a flag. And what that means is they're flagging you over. We were flagged all evening, and after a while, we thought we were firemen. People wave at firemen. They don't wave at coppers. But everybody suddenly just wanted to wave at us. They wanted to talk to us and tell us what a grand job we were doing. That lasted about 3 days maybe, and everybody went back to whatever they do. I was a little surprised at how quickly the patriotism went away. Did you fellows see the graphics, the newspaper pictures of the profusion of flags all over?
Oh, sure.
Gentlemen?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, absolutely, we did.
Wonder how they came down. Who the hell would think of taking the flags down then, you know?
That's a good point. And the churches were filled as well, you know, and we saw how quickly that ended. But you're right. Who took the flags down? Why? You know, okay. Life returned to normal rather quickly. Of course, we were told to go shopping, weren't we, right after that?
Yeah, sure.
I'll carry on.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. But you've got to admit, I mean, with your experience, that we have turned into this. I mean, today the topic is NSA surveillance, active wiretapping or active surveillance. I mean, how did we get here? I guess I don't even know what to ask. With given your background, I mean, is this a normal progression, or is this?
Sure, it is. You know, it's like scientists. Okay. They do what they do, and they disregard the consequences of what they're doing. They hide behind, well, we were just doing research. So I've been involved, trained in intrusion, electronic surveillance, and counter-surveillance over decades. It's evolved now, as some has recently been revealed, to unbelievable status and what they can do anything, you know, today. Therefore, in my opinion, they do. You know, people do what they can do. I was in an organization not too long ago, and I was admitted to the sacrosanct, locked, key-coded place where the IT gang sit. I found out that they were playing games on the computer or listening to what was going on within their venue. People do that. So I'm not taken aback at all. I'm a different guy in that if I don't believe it will be read, I don't write it, you know, and I believe at all times that it's being recorded by numerous people, including bad guys. So if I don't want to read it in the newspaper or have it played to me, I don't say it, guys, really. That's your only defense against it. I've noticed in the past few days there's several companies coming up charging a lot of money with exotic cryptography, and they can do this in millionths of a second, and they can assure your privacy, which I opine is the sheerest nonsense, of course. So I see a money market already of these guys, the techies, making money promising you privacy. And I'm on your program to tell you it ain't going to work. If sophisticated enough organizations want to intrude on it, certainly NSA, which we call no such agency, or never say anything is appropriate today, certainly if they want to look at your stuff, they can readily do it. Does that make sense?
Yoda, Yoda, one thing that we did not discuss prior to our interview tonight, I have, and I don't know if you know about this or not, but I am the subject of an NSA investigation. I learned this through a notification that was really accidentally diverted to my telephone, and this is somebody from the intelligence agency explaining this to me. I was talking with another media personality in the United States. It just happened as well. I was talking with some Fox News correspondents, very well known, that were involved on the periphery of the James Rosen case. And on May 30th, I found out that I was the subject of an NSA investigation. And, of course, there's only two ways, it's my understanding, and perhaps you can clarify this for me. One, for the NSA to actively listen to your phone calls and route that information to a person. The first way would be through a FISA court, or the second way would be just by some rogue person or group within the NSA to make that judgment call. How worried should I be?
I wouldn't be worried at all. You're doing the right thing, and you're doing things right. So I wouldn't be at all worried. It's a little spooky. I compare it to cameras. The average housewife that's in a shopping mall today for 2 hours is photographed more than 200 times. I think that's a little spooky. But as with telephone, text, email intrusions, it's there, it's there to stay. So were I you, sir, I wouldn't be worried at all, given what you're doing. Another whole world is... Go ahead, sir.
I was just curious if the real objective there was, are they looking for the identity of sources? Are they looking for what's being discussed in terms of political dissidents, if you will, that type of thing, as opposed to being foreign terrorists, given the fact that they were monitoring two U.S.-based journalists.
Yeah, they're interested in bloody everything, that might lead them to a thread of some diabolical or nefarious criminal activity. So they're really interested in everything. They're interested in your sources. You guys, I understand, please correct me at any time, are seasoned, highly trained investigators. So within investigative methods, they just uncover everything they can at the level of interest they find along the way. So certainly were you talking overseas a lot to jihadist sources, then the interest would scale up a bit. That make sense?
Okay, all right. Makes perfect sense. And I didn't mean to derail you from your thoughts, so go ahead, and you've got the floor.
At the moment, the U.S. government, actually for the past decade, has supplied nominally $20 million annually of military armaments, weapons, and trick surveillance and communications equipment to the government of Mexico. So that, of course, it's a conduit to the cartels. So the cartels have all the code stuff that anybody ever dreamed about, which puts our border people and other agencies in a strain. They're afraid to use their equipment now for fear that, and good fear, that the cartels are breaking their cryptos. The government has done this for a decade under the guise of window dressing in the big war on drugs, which of course doesn't exist. But the good citizens read that we just sent Mexico $20 million of arms, and, well, they usually don't measure the equipment or mention the equipment. And the good citizen complacent thinks, gee, that's good, it's the war on drugs. It's, of course, ridiculous. I don't know who would ever believe you could buy an AK-47 RPG or a machine gun in a Texas gun shop. Picture, gentlemen and audience, if you will, walking through the gun shop with a shopping cart full of that stuff. That's absurd. So most of their military arms actually comes from the government, as does their trick counter-surveillance stuff. So why did I share that with you in the audience? I don't know. I thought it was interesting. What do you guys think?
Well, it's interesting in the context of, I mean, it's definitely interesting, but if you look at it in the context of Fast and Furious, you know, what was that all about? Aside from an outright attack, in my view, at least, on the Second Amendment, kind of a pretext, false flag, if you will, whatever you want to call it. I guess, Yoda, at this point, given your experience, one thing that concerns us the most is the militarization, the extent of the militarization of our country. What do you have to say about that?
Every country throughout history, it started back almost prehistory in India, that has deprived the citizen of weapons, has become despotic. The only logical reason for it is ultimate control, communistic control, for an ism word, of the population. There is no other logical reason to make the population defenseless. There isn't even an imaginary reason. Nobody's naive enough to think that you're going to rid the country of guns or anywhere else of weapons to defend themselves. There are estimates of 200 million guns in the United States. An old close friend of mine wrote the white paper. She's Bonnie Anderson, formerly she was international vice president for CNN. After leaving CNN, she wrote an expose of the media. The name of the book is called Newsflash. Bonnie was kind enough to credit and include me in her book. But Bonnie's white paper counted the guns back then at about 200 million. So to me, the good news is we're not going to get that paste back in the tube. You know, the guns are here to stay. Other good news, it would be a hell of a chore, though not impossible, to confiscate the guns. And I believe I would bet that that's coming. You know.
How would they possibly do that, Yoda? I mean, wouldn't that be a logistical nightmare? Or, I mean, how would they confiscate? And that's a real serious concern I have, but how would they do that?
Here is a thought for you. Combine FEMA and Department of Homeland Security under its curious components and a couple other organizations, and you have a really powerful federal force in violation of posse comitatus, you know, the act that prevents federal activity like the Army. So putting that together, as did Mao Zedong, as did Stalin, as did Hitler, and on, Idi Amin, you get a mammoth Hitlerian brown shirt organization, which becomes black shirts, as the SS did. And there's so many of the Schutzstaffel, the German bad guy. They can do damn near anything if there's enough of them dedicated enough. So however absurd, it could certainly happen here as it's happened elsewhere. Happened in a lot bigger place in China. It happened in a lot bigger place in Russia. So my perspective is different. I've been in I don't know how many countries. that turned tyrannical and communistic while I was there or shortly before I got there. So events like economic collapse, martial laws, border problems, crime problems, false flags, get together in a country, and one of the events are spectacular, like I think it's Turkey's big fuss today over a raise in bus fare. Might have been Brazil, either one. That can domino other things, and pretty soon there's a tank down on the corner and you're under martial law. So I believe, without scintilla of doubt, certainly it can happen here. I hope and pray that with folks like you awakening people, that it doesn't happen here. I've lived in these hellholes, and I know how bad it is. It's terrible, really. I've always been glad to land back here in the land of the big PX. That was military.
Yeah. But Yoda, one thing that I'm very concerned with, a number of things I'm concerned with. We're looking at a full plate here, and of course I see, and folks, we're talking with a man that goes by the name, the moniker Yoda, okay, because this man he's been in over 100 countries. He's on the counter-terrorist team. He's made a lot of enemies, many friends as well, but many deadly enemies. So, in the interest of his safety, we will refer to him as Yoda. But that said, we're looking at, and you, with your experience at 76 years old, looking back over the course of really in your adult life, looking over the progression of our country. Right now, we stand at the precipice of A, a financial collapse, it's mathematically certain, B, a world war breaking out in Syria based on our activities in Benghazi, and C, just the total loss of freedoms in the societal uproar that will take place when both A and B take place. What are you afraid of? Or I shouldn't say what we're afraid of, but what's on your radar for the immediate future of our country if things are not stopped?
Everything you've mentioned plus. The rage at the moment is the merchants of death will bet into Syria, as is evolving now. The sabers are rattling more every day. That the U.S. is knowingly, it's incredible to say this, supporting Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood as rebels against Assad in Syria. I can't really fathom that. Of course, we did that in Tunisia, Libya, and huge Egypt. So that puts together a Muslim Brotherhood, the world's oldest Islamist terrorist organization. They were founded in 1920, in utter control of all those countries and sophisticated military. It will be a proxy war against Russia, as we've done since the end of the Second World War. All of the wars without end, beginning Korea, have really been a proxy war against Russia, as is the current Syrian conflict. So an immediate fear is that will escalate and could go to any extent. Could that go to World War III? Sure. Yes, it could. So that's
Yoda. Okay. Yoda, I've got to say this. After talking with extensive intelligence contacts about Benghazi, there was never a consulate or embassy in Benghazi. It was a CIA operations center. It was a villa and an annex and so on and so forth. And, of course, you had Michael Reagan had written an article building on a kernel of truth. This is back in September. I've written 20, I think as of right now, 29 articles about what happened in Benghazi, with specific emphasis on the arming of AQIM, the elite terrorist force, as well as Ansar al-Sharia, the proxies for Iran. I guess my next question is this: do we have in the White House? I'm not even sure we actually know who occupies the White House legally. I don't know what his legal name is. But that said, are we watching a reformation or reformation of, we'll say, the Ottoman Empire for global gain here at the hands of the American military? Are we not, Yoda? Are we not serving Saudi interests in Syria and all throughout the Middle East at the moment?
Oh, you have been for decades. As you're aggressively supporting leaving the border open. Sure, for decades, on and on and on. I would ask your audience to Google the Communist Manifesto written by Engels in the mid-1800s. Was written in German. There are accurate translations in English. And it will be found undeniable that the current administration is following the manifesto for the implementation of communism. So I'm inviting you, gentlemen, and the audience to please research on your own anything that I'm sharing with you, and of course come to your own conclusions. So the manifesto is adjusted only a little bit, not in substance, adjusted for technology, exactly where we are today. I'd like to respond to a chat room question, if I may. We were asked about FEMA camps. If you look under Halliburton and other contracts let by the government, by Department of Homeland Security and others, you will readily find that a lot of camps, mostly on military bases, but elsewhere freestanding as well, have been created to contain somebody. Now, they're not containing rabbits in there. It's thought by people smarter than I am that what's called a core main list exists, and they're going to roar up about 20 million, that's a hell of a lot of people, and stick them in these camps. So that's my opinion, chat room folk, about the camps. As I said early in the program, in my appearance on the program, there's a lot of nonsense conspiracies about the camps also. You'll see published that there's railroad cars with guillotines in them and all that kind of nonsense. So you have to sort through that. But anybody with basic research skills can find out that there are indeed camps. They exist from Maine to California, mostly on military bases, but many freestanding. So the logical question, as the chat room folk asked, is what are they going to contain? Where are they going to get people to stick in them? Anyway, I wanted to respond to what I happened to see in the chat room.
Well, okay. Let's, if you don't mind, let's extend that one more step. Will they contain? In my view, it'd be one of two, or a combination of a couple of elements here. I believe, from what I was told from people within the community, within the intelligence world, that when things get rough here because of an economic collapse or because of the cut, the threat of the flow of oil or the actual cutting of the flow of oil, that we're going to see a lot of hungry people. So they're going to be the hungry are going to be, quote, cared for in these camps. And I use that cared for in a quote type, I'm not sure how they're going to be cared for. Okay. Or are they going to be for political re-education purposes? Or both?
Here's really how it works. Certain groups support the transition to communism, typically in heavy socialism. Typically throughout history, they are teachers groups, they are union groups, they are would-be cerebral academic groups, certain ethnic groups, and others. So what allows communism, heavy socialism, to come into place are these people's support of the communism, those that I mentioned and others. So then communism is implemented, and who's ever in power says, oh man, our first concern now is a counter-revolution. These groups that I mentioned were very effective in getting me into power. So if they don't like what I'm doing, they will act again in counter-revolution. There will be a junta, and I will be strung up, or I'll be out of power. So we better round those people up. This has happened dramatically in Cuba, and it's happened around the world. That's what Stalin did. That's what Castro did. So as soon as they're in power, they're paranoid about what they then call counter-revolutionaries, and that's the first level that hits the camps. I'm a collector of ironies, as you guys are, and I find that ironic, really. But the dumb bastards that supported them are now the first ones to hit the camps. So there you go.
That's an interesting... Yeah, and that's very interesting. And Mitch, our producer, said to tell you that the Hagmann report will be broadcast live from a FEMA camp in Region 3 or 5 or whatever. But, Mitch, it says hello. It's kind of frightening to think about this, but Obama, as you had indicated, following the Communist Manifesto, plank by plank, step by step. Yoda, how much time we got?
What a question, and I wish I had a clue. Like back to 9/11, the way I've experienced it is 1 minute you're in a suburb of San Diego and you're on the way to Starbucks, which that's not a plug. I live at bloody Starbucks anyway. And the next minute there's a tank blocking the intersection. Tanks win, they're the boss of it. So it happens quickly. I heard you mention preparation. You can't prepare during or after an incident like martial law. You better be doing it before the incident. So I am in full support of you guys, and you should be at least minimally prepared. But it happens usually from an apparent small incident, as with the bus thing there. And I think in Brazil it's a bus protest, but that can domino and trigger all the other stuff. Somebody just asked a question on the thing. Sorry, I missed it.
Go ahead. Boy, no, that quick. Boy, I'm telling you. Folks, listen to what this man has to say. But by the way, those joining us just now, you're listening to a very special guest who goes by the moniker Yoda. He's awarded that, was given that moniker by a counter-terrorist team when he was in the Holiday Inn by the swimming pool in Beirut, Lebanon, in the early 1980s. But and his website, by the way, folks, it's a must-read website. magnifiedview.com. That's magnifiedview.com. To think it would happen that quickly, and yes, going up against the tank, it's not exactly a winning proposition. What do you make of all the keyboard warriors who say, well, we've got a contingent here? I mean, we've kind of virtual beer muscles in a bar. You got virtual beer muscles behind the keyboard. What do you make of this? I mean, do we stand a chance in fighting?
Yeah, I believe in history. It sure repeats itself. I'd like to mention there are people now spending a lot of energy and money in hundreds of miles away, safety, recluse places to go to. And commercial people are making a lot of money taking over old missile silos. They're charging millions to go there and hide till whatever happens, quit happening. They ain't going to make it, because in a real crisis, there is gridlock within 30 minutes. So I have personally been in a lot of these around the world. How the hell are they going to get 100 miles away to their mountain hideout? They're not. Because this stuff goes down incredibly quickly when it goes. So just to create some more enemies with the people that are making millions selling that stuff, and they're selling trailers, semi-trailers, and they're burying them in the middle of nowhere to go live there. If they're in a serious metropolitan area, they're not going to get there because they won't get past the road. Having said that and created a few more enemies, how are we doing, guys?
Create a few more enemies. No, I think it's a refreshing. You're telling the truth. I mean, it's how it is. Joe, did you have a question or an observation? Okay, Yoda. Okay, are we looking at Obama? And see, I've got this issue with Obama. Insofar as I don't know who the guy is. I mean, I know what he is. I know that much, but I don't know who he is. I believe he's a cutout. I believe that, not a conspiratorial way, but I believe that he was, when his mother was working with Geithner's father in microfinance in Indonesia, to me that was no coincidence. And you've got blocks of time that Obama cannot account for. You've got this passport situation with him, and on and on and on and on and on. I'm looking at Obama as, is he somebody that was put in here to finish a task, maybe be the last, what our enemies think, the last president of the United States? I don't want to go too far out in the weeds here, but what do you think about Obama and him? People
much smarter than I am in the community, in the intel community, believe, as you just said, they think he's not smart enough or has the background to be this goofy, So a lot of people whom I respect and admire believe he's being run. That's our expression for somebody's controlling him, He obviously has no background or experience or anything else. How the hell we elected him twice, I have no idea. It's not a good thing. But there he is, a block organizer. He hasn't been to this day outside of 50 feet from a communist all his life, a stark communist, including bloody terrorists. So if it looks like a duck and quacks and walks, it's probably a duck. That's all he knows is communism. So I believe he is indeed headed in that direction. And I believe, because I respect my sources, which are unbelievable, thanks for the compliments tonight, but a lot of guys and gals have done more than me. So I believe him, that he's being run. So by who, I don't know. I'm as suspicious as most about Trilateral, Bilderberg, in the goofy Skull and Bones. I know that they have a cadre, an inner circle, that belongs to two of the three organizations. So a cadre belongs, to Bilderberg and Trilateral Commission. I don't mean that everybody's in it is in some conspiracy or even aware. They're just dupes sucking up the prestige. Let me address something to Mrs. Jones on the net. I lose track of time. I'm terrible, Mrs. Jones. I did a lot of Libya. Boy, you were there at an interesting time in the late 70s, I'll tell you. I would love to know what you were doing in Libya or what you'd like to tell me. I was getting in a lot of trouble anyway. So if you feel like it, drop a line to me, yoda@magnifiedview.com, and I'd love to, go on further with you, Mrs. Jones. Okay. Sorry, where were we? Yeah, I believe he's being run. Yeah.
Yeah, I do too. And I look at this from the globalist angle. Ladies and gentlemen, do you feel like, seriously, if you're sitting by your computer listening to this, go ahead and turn your lights down. And do you feel like you're in the ground or subterranean level of a parking garage talking to Deep Throat? Seriously. That's the way I feel. And that's a compliment, too, by the way. It seems as if, it's great to talk with someone who's been there and done things like this. I believe he's being run. I believe that this has been in the works for a long time. What do you see any false flags? I mean, people talk about false flags all the time. We have a great history of false flags. But do you see anything? What's on your radar of false flags currently?
They've existed since biblical times. So it's a common disaffection, provocateur way of causing trouble and accomplishing your military ends. The famous one is when Germany invaded Poland, and they did that. They dressed a bunch of Germans in Polish uniforms, pretended to attack a border post, and then reacted with then the world's largest army invading Poland. So the Germans impersonating Poles attacking Germany were a classic false flag. But all governments engage in them all the time. Sure, I'm concerned about it. It routinely accomplishes government ends all over the world since the Bible. Yes, sir. And
no, go ahead.
Sorry, it goes wherever your imagination or their imagination might take you. There's usually an emotional component which brings the folks around to believing it and being outraged. Somebody burned down the orphanage and it's whoever we're mad at. So go forward 3 steps and there's a tank by my coffee shop. True. That's exactly how it works. I've taught a course, called Active Listening. If you good folks, audience, who I'm thrilled are there, indulging me in what I have to say, look up Active Listening. It's free, and it's on the web somewhere. I used to teach it. It's taught to police and agents. It raises your listening power quantum times. I am an active listener, and I listen to what procrastinator Obama says. And he virtually says that he's a communist. I believe him. I don't think there's a doubt. NSA, did you get that?
I don't think. Yeah.
What?
NSA. Yeah, I think the NSA did get that loud and clear, and I don't think there's any doubt, really, among people that Obama is a communist. But given that, why is there so much apathy among people? And I know people might be rolling their eyes, saying, "What kind of question is that?" But knowing what we have, knowing that Leon Panetta, Panetta came out. He told the U.S. congressman that they would tell the Congress what the international community is doing, or the intelligence community was doing, but they didn't have to get their approval. I mean, we're into this tyrannical state, but there's this apathy. Is it? I mean, what is it? Cognitive dissonance, or is it?
Let me share why it is. Our biggest enemy is denial, repression. It's not going to happen to me, whatever happens. So if you will, audience, please, next time you're in a car, you'll stop at a red light at an intersection. Pedestrians crossing with the light will deliberately not look at the cars that are coming. Hell, in this day, it's logical that there's a crackhead on meth that just stole the damn car and is about to run you over. But they have the green light, the pedestrian. So they are stubbornly and determinedly not going to look at the cars coming. That's denying and repressing that something bad might happen. Notice as well, many, when they get to the other curb, will look back over their shoulder like that was a victory they just accomplished. Move that on, if you will, to what we call the normalcy bias. The normalcy bias, in short, is most people have a total inability to imagine horrible that they haven't experienced. So we're very fortunate so far in America. There haven't been tanks by my coffee shop. There hasn't been martial law that's restrictive, and there hasn't been a tyrannical government or a war and takeover on our soil. So this doesn't hit their normalcy bias. So that's the Hagmann's, your wild producer Mitch, and our mission is to get through the denial and repression and to get through their normalcy bias. It is our largest enemy by far. They simply don't want to think about it.
Yeah. I couldn't agree.
I teach with a big stuffed purple ostrich. People prefer to sit around with their head in the sand. Also, this administration now has the population so on the ropes. Obamacare, excessive unemployment. Everybody's worried. A recent survey a large survey, had a full-on 20% scared to death that somebody in their family will be laid off this year. So they are too worried and preoccupied, which is a wonderful communist takeover tactic, to be concerned with the events you and I are discussing. So that's how it works. I've been in countries where it's that bad.
Tactic, yeah.
People I've seen, they get so used to it, they actually step over bodies on their way to their office. So that's an extreme example of denying and repressing what's going on. It's not going to happen to them. And it's a hell of a battle. Most of your audience, and you folks and your wild producer Mitch and I and themagnifiedview.com is trying to educate them.
You know, folks, definitely the Magnified View. That's www.magnifiedview.com. That's Yoda's website, magnifiedview.com. Yoda, could you stick with us are you okay to stick with us for maybe another 15, 20 minutes, another segment to take maybe some calls? Are you up for that?
I haven't had this much fun standing up in a long time. Yes.
Oh, God bless you, my friend. Folks, we're at the top of the hour. We need to take a break. You're listening to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report on this, the 18th day of June 2013, with our very special guest, Yoda. And, of course, that's the moniker he was given while vacationing in lovely Beirut, Lebanon. Third and final hour of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. This has gone. I'm going to tell you something. I am absolutely humbled to be joined by a gentleman who has been, he's a legend in the counterintelligence industry, venue, I should say, a legend. He goes by the moniker of Yoda. And, you know, I've got to ask you, Yoda, welcome back, by the way, and folks, visit his website, in fact, bookmark it. His website is magnifiedview.com. During the break, I was talking with someone somebody in the intelligence industry. His question was this, basically a two-part question. Are there enough oath keepers? What about the oath keepers? Are there enough good people left to put up any type of good resistance? And the second part of that question, what about are there too many yes men already in the system? Have we been internally compromised? This is a gentleman that always says, and I believe this, that we're a captured operation right now. That America is a captured operation. But so two parts of that question. Too many yes men inside the system? Are we cooked there? And what about the oath keepers? Is there enough there for adequate resistance to at least slow down their plans?
Sure there is. I am ever the optimist. Yeah. Here's why. First, people join police departments. I did because I could have a gun and drive fast. No. Well, I did that too. But their motivation joining the police department today is adrenaline, camaraderie, and helping people. This is what they do. They are incredibly trained today in most places. Oh, you could find some sheriff department in slapstick somewhere, I don't know, that isn't. But in the main, coppers today do a demanding 6-month academy, competitive. It rules out the ones that like to be a cop but don't want to do what cops do. Then they do at least a 3-month field training by a field training officer. The training officer varies from day to day in a graduated, more difficult program and rates them daily. Then, at every briefing, they're training. So they're highly sophisticated, well-equipped today, and I've described their motivation. They are my heroes. I work with them on a street level all the time, despite my ancient age. And I'm 99% of anybody I deign to work with is not going to do anything bad to the citizens. That's not what they're about. They're about the opposite of that. Okay. On to the military. As you know, I was an Air Force and Army veteran. The Uniform Code of Military Justice prohibits your following an unlawful order. So, and I live near the world's largest Marine base. Do you know why they're in the Marines, Joe? Joe?
No.
Because they couldn't get in the Army. That was funny.
Yeah, I got it. Okay.
here with cops that are mostly former Marines. Can you imagine the trouble I get into with the cops that were former Marines? Anyway, in my opinion, the communists aren't going to call on U.S. Army troops to accomplish their evil ends, because so many of them are the guy next door, their leaders are good, they're not going to put up with unlawful orders. So I'm back to a combination elements of units like DHS, like FEMA, and others we don't know the names of. These are the people I'm worried about. Of course, I'm concerned with the freaking mountain of ammunition they just bought, which there is no rationale for in the known world, nor in DHS's current table of organization is there anybody to give anywhere near this amount of ammunition. You'd have to put Customs, ICE, and the Coast Guard on a range 24 hours a day shooting that stuff, and you'd still have stuff left over. So I allege flat out there is some diabolical reason for collecting that ammunition, in addition to it being to strangle the ammunition supply, which everybody knows about. A Yoda-ictote, like an anecdote, but it's a Yoda-ictote. Recently, 2 San Diego suburb SWAT teams, literally, I know this, I went there, literally went to a gun show to buy ammunition for the SWAT teams. So they're being deprived of ammunition, obviously. If the bad guys had any confidence in the cops working with them, they wouldn't be starving cops of ammunition. Would they? No, they wouldn't. Okay.
No. Wow. So the information, by the way, that you're saying, this some sort of hybrid federal force combining DHS, FEMA, could it perhaps also include the TSA, or in your view?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I missed TSA. Yeah. In fact,
because I was told that.
Yeah, as you guys and your heightened awareness audience knows, TSA is running around far outside its charter, heavily armed, doing roadblocks on public highways, interstates. They're also invading Social Security offices. Now, what the hell are they doing there? Nobody knows. There was a recent incident in Tennessee. If, gentlemen and audience, I say I know, it means I know, or I'll say I think or I guess. I know this. Where TSA set up a roadblock, Lord knows why, and the state police and the county sheriff's office ran them off. So I don't really subscribe to the rogue thing. It just doesn't fit most cases or incidents at all. It comes from down high. The water comes from down high. So like NSA or like the IRS or like any of it, a couple guys in Cincinnati, GS-8s, that's a pay grade in the federal government, they didn't come up with this attack the Republican thing, of course not. So, yeah, sorry I omitted TSA. Yeah, that's a big one. Sure. Yes, sir.
Okay.
So I believe
that does. Yeah, that matches up with the information I've been getting. Just by the way, okay. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Yoda, but I'll tell you. I'll give out the phone number 661-244-9839. That's 661-244-9839. Your one chance to talk with a legend in the intelligence world. We're going to take calls in the order in which they are received. Please be succinct and ask your question, and then you can hang up and listen off air. Joe, I'll toss it to you.
All right. We will go to the phones. Area code 407. You're up first. You're on with the Hagmann and Hagmann Report and our very special guest, Yoda. What is on your mind tonight? 407.
Going once. All right.
Let's
move on here.
Till we answer, I spotted a thing on the chat room. Somebody said Russian Spetsnaz. I'd like to know what they meant or what they're thinking about. I know the Spetsnaz part. I wonder what they were thinking.
Well,
just curious.
There's been a lot of talk of foreign troops on our soil. And
yeah, they're talking about the different types of troops that we would see here on the U.S. For some kind of calamity, catastrophe, whatever they're planning, whether it be natural or economic, whether it be UN troops or Russian Spetsnaz troops or German soldiers. That's what the training in our country. Thank you, Chrissy. Yeah, first, the training. Are there Russian Spetsnaz training that you know of in the U.S.? And two, if so, would they be used in the U.S. for domestic operations?
No, I think a couple of things. With military attachés around the world, they operate out of embassies. They probably go back to biblical times. We have them and everybody else has them. We've trained legitimately, if it is, for foreign troops here since I can remember. Sometimes the foreign troops we train turn into enemies because it's a dynamic world. But I'm not concerned with with Russian, I call them Ivans, I'm politically correct. I'm not concerned with them here at all. I am concerned with the threat from within. That's me. The UN, on the other hand, the global dominance thing, is indeed preparing to occupy the United States with the blue helmet cops. I am indeed worried about that should that come to pass. That's been a joke all over the world. The UN could screw up a cannon. Huh?
Yeah.
Sorry?
No, wouldn't they make good? And I say this knowing what I'm saying here, but you see a bunch of blue helmets, you're going to have target practice against blue helmets, are we not? I mean, isn't that what's going to break out? I can't imagine this.
Yeah, at the risk of appearing blunt and a gunslinger, I hope so, and I think it will. In all of these crises, it seems to be a pendulum that I've experienced on the ground. It goes so far, and then the good guys finally stand up. I believe, on the other hand, there is the effeminization of America. The guys, compared to my day, are turning into wusses as fast as they can. Hell, there's house husbands now. There are handbags for men. Recently, I saw that there's ladies' underwear for men. What an image that is. So we're training the guys to become more and more effeminate. That's not going to get it against jihadists. No. And the feminists aren't going to get it against jihadists, I promise you. I've been there with a jihadist and done that. I got the cup and the T-shirt and everything. But at the end, when it really goes down,
much more.
There is a core cadre here that will stand up, as we have in the past. My father was decorated in the First World War with that crisis. My somewhat older cousins were decorated in the Second World War. They caught me in Korea underage. My mother ratted me out. They brought me back. I was real underage. They brought me back to the States. anyway. So I believe, the good guys will stand up. What do you folks think?
Right.
What do you think? Yeah.
I hope you're right, and I just hope that the good guys are not in some way neutralized or maneuvered out of the way in a certain time so that it could be filled with these psychopaths, as I like to call them, the people that would just go rape and pillage villages of people at the whim of a leader's orders.
Yeah, I'll share with you that Mao and his Red Guard, those are the students, that I described earlier, wiped out villages. Man, there is rice paddies now. I'll send you early satellite photograph. There are rice paddies where there were villages. Yeah, it happens. But optimistically, which I am, I think there's enough Hagmanns here and your wonderful, goofy producer, Mitch, to stave that off, really. It can be hell. I'm not saying it's going to be a cakewalk if it goes down that bad. It'll be proper interesting.
I've never heard it described like that. Proper interesting.
Let's go back to the phones. We do have somebody on the line, 443. We're going to you next. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report with our special guest, Yoda.
Yoda, thanks for taking the calls and everything. I overheard you saying about President Barack Obama. You were saying how you're not really sure how he, who he, maybe you were getting a feeling maybe Bilderberg Group or something. And I wanted to know what you thought about the Majesty, the Queen of England. If you ever saw a video how he had something to do with a champagne glass or something. He was going to give her a cheers. If you ever saw that, and she just kind of But
thanks.
Yeah, and your take on the shadow cabinet on the party out there. What do you think of that?
Thanks for the call, brother. I'll address them one at a time. The Obamas have been a protocol disaster everywhere they've been. He certainly was in England with the Queen at that dinner. She has been an utter disaster, including violating protocol, insulting the Pope. So protocol has been in place for 1,000 more years. And I imagine their protocol officer used to run a barbecue on South State Street in Chicago because they violate diplomatic protocol every day. Sorry, I'm old. What was your second question, brother?
It was on the shadow.
What was it?
The shadow cabinet.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about that?
No, I hear it as a term. And I believe
it's official.
Yeah, well, I believe it's a group that runs Obama and company, sure. I don't have a problem with that.
If you just Google the official shadow cabinet, it's exactly how the political parties are set up, like their executive branch in England.
Mm-hmm.
I was just saying you should Google it if you're not really familiar. It's called Shadow Cabinet.
I certainly will. I did a lot of England. I did a lot with the Brits. I enjoyed it there. I lived in Belgium. Thanks for the
call very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I apologize, Yoda. There's unfortunately, because of some very bad weather, where we're
delays.
Yeah. We're broadcasting from, it's like this 3 or 4 second delay, and I apologize for that. But that caller should know better. He's a regular listener. We don't use, ladies and gentlemen, Google as a verb on this show. Next call.
That's right. We, what is it? Search,
right. We don't use Google.
Okay.
All right.
We have Donna on the line. Hey, Donna, you're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report with Yoda.
Yeah, thank you. I have a question. I'll make it brief. There was a man that went around in the 80s, Yuri, and I'm sorry, it's Russian. I can't remember his last name. But he outlined the way you go through and take over a country. I can't remember all 5 of them. One was demoralization, something, normalization, crisis, and of course you can have civil war or a takeover. You may be familiar with them speaking about. And in that line, and you were correct in his assessment, he said the very people that helped him get into power, he started, teachers, the liberal professors, and he has his reasons. He goes through the reasons why they are eliminated, because they will become a problem, disillusions, whatnot. And in that outline I just said, and I can't remember all 5 of them, I don't have my notes in front of me, but definitely demoralization has been accomplished.
Donna, you're referring to Yuri Bezmenov, and he was interviewed, I believe, by I believe he was interviewed by G. Edward Griffin. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure.
No, you're right. That's correct. It was so if he's familiar with that, at what stage are we at? And I'll take it off so everybody else can call. Thank you. God bless. Bye.
Thanks for the call, Donna. It's hard for me to peg a stage. It's hard to see through how all of the negative stuff is happening and how it interconnects. But since Obama especially, I believe it's quite advanced in the stages you described. You've got problems that just didn't exist before. You've got them all now. I've experienced them all, usually one at a time in different countries. And when you get a couple of the components, it brings on the others. But my colleagues and peers and I have never seen the likes of what it's like here today in all its components. The economy, employment, just on and on and on. Good call, Donna, thanks.
So we're facing the perfect storm. We've got effeminate men. You've got women who are becoming more and more aggressive. There are parts of the United States that are functioning, while others are in a full state of depression. You've got looming war. You've got all sorts of things. I mean, a perfect storm. Am I correct?
Absolutely. And as an interested viewer for decades, I've not seen the likes of it as it exists today. And I don't see it getting fixed. I just see it exacerbated. I see it getting worse. All of the elements, Nobody's going to do anything about the border. They never have. I've worked closely with my heroes on the border, both ICE and the Border Patrol, And it's a joke, but it always has been. That's nothing new. People make a lot of money from the border being open. The government makes an enormous amount of money. It employs all kind of people. It employs people at federal, county, state, and city level. Were the border closed, there wouldn't be illegals, and they'd be out of work. Churches make a lot of money, many of them out of illegals, because that's their congregation. Education makes a huge amount of money out of illegals because they're overpaid for not educating them. And just on attorneys, there are more con immigration attorneys, and they make a fortune. There is a black market business that deals exclusively with illegals. They make a bunch of money. So these, and I'm missing a couple entities, they get together and they hire important lobbyists in D.C. who are not without influence and lobby to keep the border open. So it's about money, and I don't see it changing ever. And it spans both political parties. No one's really lifted a finger to close it. They publish false reports. A couple months ago in a dinky county in Texas, there were 60,000 that they caught. There's a surge now coming across the border anticipating amnesty. They've got that right. Among the 60,000 were other than Mexicans, including Arabs. There have been Qurans and Hezbollah material found at the border. Yet nothing is done about this, and I will bet you that nothing will be done about it. And I can't Obama it serves his political and other interests to keep it open, but it's existed long before him. I did a border article listing all of most of the factions that get a lot of money and are dependent on an open border. If you get a minute, audience, take a look at it. It's magnifiedview.com. But it spells out, I think, articulately why the border's still open and will be.
All right, thanks.
Wow.
We're going to go to another phone call here. Area code 662. We're coming to you next. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.
Yes, is that me?
That is you.
Oh, hey. Yes.
Yep, you're...
Hi, Yoda. One asterisk, my friend. Look, assuming this perfect storm takes place under Obama, which I'm sure is coming, what do you think the probabilities are that we would experience countrywide EMP preceding preemptive nuclear strike by Russia, Red China, Korea, or whomever during our time of total the perfect storm, so to speak? What do you think the odds of that would be?
I can't put it on thanks for the call. It's a good call. I can't put it on an odds for you, but I think they're good. I think, it doesn't really destroy anything, so anybody wanting to occupy the states, it would sure be a good time for them to do an EMP. And the sun's been acting up again, so certainly an EMP is, from some source, highly probable. Incidentally, to throw water on that, the boxes don't work that you put stuff in, and I've never figured out what you'd put in the box anyway. You know what I mean?
Referring to a Faraday cage?
Yeah, what would you put in there?
Anything with a microchip.
Yeah, but then who would you call? Were there an EMP? You'd have to know somebody else with a cage. And a pinhole in the cage will eliminate its usefulness. I mean, it's cool to have it. If I had one, I'd show everybody, but I don't know what I'd put in there. I wouldn't put my cell phone in.
Worth it.
Yeah, well, it would be. I couldn't call anybody.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
I feel about to these remote hideaways 200 mile away. I suppose if I had a remote hideaway 200 mile away, I'd put a Faraday cage in there. Maybe. Yeah, but the possibility of an EMP is certainly there. It's not that hard to do. The higher the above ground level it would be set, the larger area it would cover, and it's just not all that hard to do.
But I would think the problem, well, actually it'd be a two-edged sword, because in the first place it would level the playing field, so people like the DHS and TSA and such, all of their high-tech equipment would be useless, and we'd be on a level playing field between, shall we say, American rebels and these forces. But at the same time, it would also tend to destroy the technological advantage of the American military to repel any kind of invasion. I mean, we would almost be riding horses carrying M16s.
Yeah, point well made. And we wouldn't have parts for the M16 because they're often made in countries that could be enemies. TSA uniforms are made in the People's Republic of China. Our passport blanks now, which were the sacred document, ever, are made in Taiwan. So I agree with you fully. Good call, really.
Well,
I'm too old for that horseback stuff.
Caller, thank you so much for that call.
Good call.
Yeah. Oh, man, I'll tell you, you think about these things, it's enough to keep you awake at night. And like I said, ladies and gentlemen, if you're sitting home alone listening to this broadcast, just dim the lights a bit and imagine yourself in the subterranean parking garage talking with an informant back in the 70s, we'll say, like Deep Throat. Holy cow. Interesting stuff.
I don't do parking lots. I do coffee shops. What?
Coffee shops. Well, you've actually graduated to the coffee shops, and we'd fit well together as well. It's coffee shop.
Yeah, I want to know you pair a long time, really.
Well, I'll tell you what. Rather than take any more calls, let's give you the last word here. Anywhere you want to take us, any words of wisdom, anything at all, the floor is yours. You've earned it for your service in the intelligence world. Whatever is on your mind. You've got an audience right now, a worldwide audience that's listening to you. So we're going to turn the floor over to you here. We've got just several minutes left of our broadcast. Take us where you want to take us.
Thank you, sir. I would really echo your comments about preparation. The news has that there are about 3 million so-called preppers in the United States and growing. Everybody I talk to is going to prepare something someday. And it certainly makes sense for natural or man-made catastrophes, as you've said, to have food, water, communications, a family plan, and way to defend yourself. Everybody puts that off. A trick with that is maybe going to the grocery store to buy a couple extra cans of something. Better to have that than not do anything at all. I would urge folks to get things that they like and their kids like. There's nothing like being stuck in the dark, freezing in the cold, and having a bunch of dumb food that nobody likes, especially the kids. So I'm not a big nutrition guy or all that stuff. We're prepared with stuff I like, which is pretty childish, but I'm 76. I've gotten by with it so far. So I'm going to recommend the beginners to look at a government website, believe it or not. It's called ready.gov, ready.gov. That has a good basic generic plan for your home office people, and it shows a good kit that you should assemble. Interesting thing happening today, the government, the feds, have extended how long you should be prepared for on the one hand. And on the other hand, they're taking a hard look through no such agents, NSA, at people who are over-preparing as enemies. You can't win with these damn governments, but I would sure hope that people are preparing a little bit. The government ain't coming with the cheese. That's an old reference that in poor neighborhoods that the government used to bring the people cheese. It's kind of like law enforcement today as well. When the seconds count, the police are minutes away. I want to say that again. When seconds count, the coppers are minutes away. They're reactive. They're in their own handcuffs today because of ridiculously politically correct nonsense laws They're often prevented from functioning as we were back in the day. So you need to figure out how to defend yourself from whatever threat that might occur, including criminal threats and burglaries. So a really important thing to look at under bad times is looters. That's been the motivation of most of the riots, the big ones in L.A. and Chicago and whatnot. We say ready, set, loot, because that's really organized in what it's all about. They're very effective at today through text messages and cell phones. So I wish people would be prepared. What the good civilians don't understand is with a natural or man-made disaster, first responders are affected personally, as are the citizens. So I worked a big fire here a few years ago. That was an experience. I'd never done that, a big wildfire. What a trip. And many of the coppers, medics, and firemen were affected themselves and had to evacuate. So obviously they couldn't show up to help you. Back in the North Crest earthquake thing, a whole half a building fell on a line of ambulances, so they were affected and couldn't respond. So you are going to be on your own, and you better be resourceful and self-reliant to care for yourself, because as first responders will be affected, they're not going to respond. So I'm commending everyone in the strongest terms to take some preparation action tomorrow, and get started anyway. Anything you have is better than nothing. I'm running out of steam, Hagmann's here.
My friend Yoda,
for 400, you held your own there.
You held your own, and we're going to cut you loose with our gratitude and thanks. I just want to say that it's been an honor and a pleasure for someone, for us to have you, for someone like you, your caliber, and God bless you, my friend. Please visit us again, and we'll be talking. We'll be talking.
I want to send my regards to your wild producer, Mitch. I traveled with the White House press corps for a while. So as a dilettante, I know the press and I know producers and all that, and he's quite a guy, really. I want to thank Mitch. Okay.
Well, I'll tell you what, Mitch is beaming, and he's listening, and he just said he said he'll be talking to you, and thank you as well. Yoda, God bless you. Thank you so very much for joining us. And your website is, magnifiedview.com. I didn't mean to pause there. Magnifiedview.com. Yoda, God bless you. Thank you so much. You have a great day wherever you're at in these beautiful United
Absolutely.
States. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. All of us, be safe.
Indeed. Yeah, wow, Joe. I'll tell you something. What a great guy.
Fantastic, and certainly has been. He's been around doing work in over 100 countries in the counterintelligence world. That is, those are numbers that people wish they could live long enough to do, working only 5 decades in the counterintelligence world for 100 countries. That is an astonishing amount. And maybe there are many like him that get around to that many countries, but I find that mind-boggling.
Well, even at 76 is not old by any stretch of the imagination today, but he remains active in counterterrorism operations. He has made, by the way, many enemies among Islamic terrorists and narco-terrorist cartels and others, domestic and foreign, but domestic as well, who would love to see our country just implode or explode, whichever. So this is a gentleman, our producer Mitch, had convinced to come on to our program, which I want to thank Mitch very, very much for his efforts to bring this man on. Now, you might think, well, you know, what he said was nothing new, but but in a way it was, because it reinforces, first of all, it reinforces what we know. It reinforces the fact that we are telling our people, the audience, the correct things to do, but there's still hope in a way. But I thought probably, Joe, one of the most, perhaps, I don't know, the thing that struck me the most, and folks listening to this, what he said about the federal agencies, DHS, FEMA, TSA, and I would dare throw another agency in there, that being the IRS, becoming the brown shirts and then the black shirts, and then, of course, the UN coming in as well. Pay attention to that. Pay attention to exactly that, because that's lining up with the very same information I'm getting from other sources. It's that conglomeration. It's that hybrid federal army. And folks, also, if you go to his website, magnifiedview.com, there's a wealth of information there where you can get the latest information. I mean, he's got a lot of information about the gun grab, critical update for U.S. veterans and their families. Obama puts the veterans' guns in the crosshairs. Of course, things that you've heard us talk about, but he gets involved in a little bit more detail. And I think, too, there are also links to various other episodes of, just visit the website. You got to take a look at what he's got there. And congratulations, great job to his lovely wife for handling that website as well. But folks, we're in for some bumpy times ahead, which is why, you know, we say prepare, even if it is a couple of cans here, a couple of cans there of food, even SpaghettiOs if your kids will like them. And, of course, let's not forget our pets. But, you know, how much time do we have? We don't know. We really don't.
And the title of the show, Darkness to Cover All Nations, means what it says. There is no recovery. There is no turning back from this tipping point we have went over. That's right. I really don't even realize that we've gone over it. A lot of people, especially here in America, reading in Matthew today in chapters 24 and reading through some of Daniel and reading about the end times. And I keep going back to as it was in the days of Noah. People will be marrying. People will be, doing normal things, shopping. It doesn't say that in the Bible, but it talks about daily life going on as normal. Right. Now, we know that there are going to be terrible catastrophes across different parts of the world. Where those will happen, we don't know. Will America even be here? We don't know. But there will be a part of the world that will be acting like nothing's wrong. There will be a part of the world that is business as usual. And it seems with the persecutions of Christians all across the world, the starvations that are happening all across the world, the diseases, the pestilence, the regime change, the unrest, are we the ones sitting here, business as usual, going to be caught off guard? I mean, we got to ask ourselves that.
It's a good point, Joe. Very good point. I would say this. I think that the majority of people, the people either get it or they don't. The ones that get it seem to understand or have. For example, our audience, they've got a great understanding. I consider our audience like the advanced class or the PhD class, as opposed to the, what's going on in the world 101 type thing. Because our audience is very well researched in this kind of thing. the thing that we didn't get into with Yoda is the satanic element that's behind this, the root, but he mentioned too the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, of course the Bilderbergers, Skull and Bones. We've got coming up here the cremation of Harris. Don't forget the little the ceremony out there in California with all the top industry and political leaders. So all of this together, you look at 2013, it's hard to, really for me, it's hard to even articulate what I see coming or what I've been told to expect, except to say that we are going to be hungry, cold, scared, and looking for comfort. And even with others, it's going to be a situation where we're going to have to really have our stuff together. Even if you're in the advanced class, you better have your stuff together.
And I just want to say, I just got a confirmation. Thursday, we're going to be joined by Omega News Scott from Omega News. I was on his show. He wrote a fantastic book, The Omega Manifesto. I don't know if I have it with me, but he'll be on with us for an hour on Thursday. Also, this Sunday, we're going to have another show with Pastor Langford and Steve Quayle, our third edition of this series, spiritual series, on what is happening, 9 to midnight. And we might be able to get some other guests in there. We made some calls today. John Price.
Yes.
End of America. I left him a voicemail today. Hopefully we can get him on in the next 2 weeks. And so
some others surprise us. Yeah, and Yoda was just a fantastic, way cool guest, I have to tell you.
And let me tell you a story before we go here. My dad was talking with our producer and Yoda, and his voice is very, very deep. And I'm across the office here in the studio, and I hear this guy's voice from across the office, and I'm like whispering, I'm like, Dad. I'm like, is that his real voice? Because it sounded so much deeper from across the room than it did on air. I mean, it sounded like a robot. I said, does he have a tracheotomy, or that's his real voice? And I said, no, that's his real voice. And
it's like a dog whistle to a dog. Joe's ears perked up and was like, what was that? But no, look, our show is not necessarily to wake people up anymore. It's to build community with the people who are already awake. Of course, we will not leave people behind. We will, in fact, continue to wake people up as they're receptive to it. But a big part of it is to build a community with people who are awake. And we invite everyone into our extended family. And folks, please tell others about the program if you find it interesting. Share it on the social networking sites. Certainly listen once again to tonight's broadcast with Yoda. A lot of interesting information was shared. You missed, look, I can tell you this. I guarantee you missed some important information that he shared. You're going to have to listen carefully to what he said. And he's the guy that was under fire in Beirut. He's the guy that's been in over 100 countries as they fell into martial law. And like he said, you could be sitting in Starbucks and all of a sudden, it's not the Chrysler or the Ford Focus that turns the corner, but an Army tank, and suddenly your life has changed.
Before we end the show, I know people are leaving here, but one piece of news we'll probably have to hit on tomorrow. This breaking, TWA Flight 800 investigators break silence in a new documentary, claim original conclusion about case crash was wrong. Instead, now a group of whistleblowers, including an aviation expert, have come forward in a new documentary to claim that the official explanation for the crash of TWA Flight 800 was wrong, and the gas tank explosion did not bring down the flight off the coast of Long Island 17 years ago. They say they have some kind of forensic evidence that says a bomb blew up outside of the plane, causing it to be brought down. You, Dad,
yeah,
I really remember when this happened 17 years ago, and you said It didn't happen now. It said it happened.
Well, when you get you get the CIA that's having the aircraft go up, travel the trajectory, travel forward, upward for. I mean, the whole thing was a joke in terms of the. I don't want to say joke. The whole thing was a farce. The investigation was a farce. And don't forget, this was under the Clinton administration, but you had some of the same people there as you do today. And, wow.